So last time we talked, I'd shown you how to lay out the lines here by putting this into a vise and then holding the piece over top here and drawing underneath, so that when we remove that part and flip it over, it'll sit flush in the front there. So we held this in a vise to do that. Now what we want to do is we want to take that one step further here. These are the drawings for the ends of the rails there, the rabbet that goes on that. The flat part is the cheek, and that little squared out section, that 3/16 section there, is the shoulder. And it helps to give the stool a lot more strength in there by that very simple joint that gets screwed with 2 screws. So to set that up, we know we have to cut off here at this line. And we also know that because when we put that on there, the pencil is to the outside of the piece, that we have to cut the pencil line and the small section. Okay, both of those, meaning include the line in the cut there so it sits flush. Okay, so what we're first going to do is we're going to cut the board, cut it like this. And I can't just take my fence over and hold it with my hands and go through because I'm too wobbly. And if this thing messes up a little bit, 2 things can happen. Number 1, it'll mess up the cut and we got to start all over again. Number 2 is it could take the piece and throw it out behind me. You can take the piece and throw it out behind me and might touch the blade. So we want to have the board held in here well, held in at that vertical position. Okay, so we're going to use a special jig for that. We also want to have now, since we're holding it this way, we want to figure out what the height of that cut has to be to bring our blade up to the right height. So this piece goes in like this. So the direction that we're going up is the thickness of our leg here. This dimension from here to here is the thickness of the leg because it goes over top the thickness of the leg. So we want to set our blade to that thickness before we put on our jig for holding this perpendicular. So I'm going to bring this up against my blade, and I'm going to bring the blade down. And I just want to move the wood along until I get to the high spot of the blade. I want to see how high the blade is above the material. And right now we're about a 32nd. I'm going to come down a little bit less than that. I do want to be a little bit more through so I can sand the ends then afterwards. So I want to be a hair through, but I don't want to be much more than a hair. I'm going to go a little bit more. Okay? Feels good. So now I want to find a way to hold this piece up here vertically. And there are lots of different jigs for doing this. I have in here this jig. This jig is called a tensioning jig, and it just slides into the rails that are here. Into the rails that are there, and it can move back and forth, and it holds the piece on there nicely so that it can't move as we're going along. So on my blade height set, I'm actually going to lock the raising mechanism so that it will stay at that height. And now I want to look at the end that I have my line on here. Okay? And I want to cut it to the far side here. So I'm going to set my, put this over here so you can see a little better. I'm going to set this in there and I'm going to lock it in place. And when you crank like this, you move the thing around too much. So I always hold it in the middle of the screw like that so it doesn't jostle it too much while I'm trying to do this. So now I have my piece held on there well. Okay, next thing I want to do is I want to see, because before I even got on here to do this video, I replaced this backer board because my table saw the spacing between the rail and the blades a little bit different than we had in class. So one thing we should probably check now before I go any further is it square? Meaning that, is this corner here 90 degrees? From my table surface up that board, 90 degrees. And if I put my small square in here, I don't know that you can see it or not, but that is not. There's a gap at the bottom there. So I have to change this. So I'm going to loosen this up. And I'm going to rotate this until I get to 90. And it might take a second, but accuracy is going to be worth it in doing this. So I'll check it here too. Looks like I should go over a hair more. That looks great right there. Okay, so I like that for square. And I also replaced this back piece that's going to go against. And the reason for the back piece there is so that when the blade comes through in this direction, it doesn't chip the back side out when it's sitting in there. So I want to just make sure that that's square also. So table surface again to where that meets up. I'll take a look at that. And that one looks pretty good. Okay, we can live with that one. So I'm going to set this back in. And I want to remind you what we're trying to cut here. We want to cut our line because that was on the waist side when we drew that. And we want to cut the small space next to it there. So I'm going to bring this down here. Let's see if we can get any closer to what I'm doing here. Okay. All right. So it's going to come forward. And I want to set this now so that it lines up with my cut. So you can see I'm just a hair off. I'm really not off by much. But I'm going to adjust it right there. Now it looks like I'm perfect. Okay? So I'm going to lock this in that position. Remember we have our blade height set. We set our blade height to the thickness of the material here. Now we're cutting off the waist side that has to go into the inside there. Grab my glasses. Turn my vacuum on. We'll make a cut. I had to turn the power on. With the saw stop, it takes a second to check the electronics out before it tells you to go ahead. So I hold on both sides here and I move the board through. Let's take a look at that cut. So the way to check is this is the back top. And I want it to be that when I put this in here, that part there lines up flush with the back. And you can see like this part here is going to be removed, the thin section. But that part there is going to line up. So when I cut this off and it's sitting like that, that's going to sit nice and flush on the inside there. So that was a good cut. So I'm not going to adjust anything. Even if it was wrong, I wouldn't adjust anything at this point. I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to make the other cut. Now remember, when you flip it over, we cut like this. And that's how it came into it. When we flip it, if we spin it, we have our rabbets on opposite faces. So we just have to flip it straight over. So I'm cutting on my same face, drop it in, lock it up, and vacuum. Now, it should be, because on this leg here, this cut, and this cut were all done with the dado blade. So they should all be the same. This setting should work for every one of these, as long as these are all the exact same thickness. I'll check it out and see if it's true. It doesn't always work out that way. But the one up here is different, because we did that one a different way. We had a single blade on, we had it flipped upside down. We had the single blade on and we cut out that section there. So that is not going to be the same as this. So that's going to have to be adjusted absolutely here at the tending jig. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make all the rest of these cuts. And then we're going to go over and see the next step in the next room. Okay?